Most of us see ancient Egypt as a place of pyramids and mummies. But for the Egyptians, the greatest challenge wasn't on earth. It was in what came after it, the crossing of the soul after the last breath. In order to walk this path and not get lost in the afterlife, the soul needed to know how to do it. To do this, there was what we now call the Book of the Dead, a collection of spells, maps, and secret passwords. This age-old collective work described each stage precisely: what to expect, what to say, what to face and who to meet. A definitive guide to the afterlife. Without this manual, eternity was impossible. Today, Rising Cycle uses artificial intelligence to reconstruct this journey. Let's go through the portal and reconstruct the Egyptian spirit world exactly as they believed it to be. Its corridors, guardians, dangers, inhabitants, light and darkness. This is the story of how an Egyptian reached paradise, or didn't get there. Imagine a book that you take with you after death. A rolled-up papyrus placed inside the sarcophagus between the linen bands that wrapped the body. The Egyptians called it the Book of Coming Out at Daylight. We know it as the Book of the Dead. It was a compilation of up to 200 spells, each with a specific function. Some spells taught the dead to turn into a falcon to fly through the Duat. Others provided the exact passwords required by the gatekeepers. There were spells for not losing your way, for not being devoured, for answering to a judge. They were different ways for the soul to escape the dangers it would face. But there was one cruel detail: not everyone had access. Producing a Book of the Dead was expensive. Skilled scribes copied the text by hand onto quality papyrus, illustrated with detailed scenes in coloured ink. For centuries, only the elite had a complete map of the afterlife. Ordinary people entered the Duat without a guide. The last breath goes out, and then total darkness. The Ba, the soul of the dead, represented as a bird with a human face, emerges from the body and finds itself in front of a narrow passage that descends into the bowels of the earth. On the other side, the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. It was a realm of 12 regions, each corresponding to an hour of the night, one region per hour, before being reborn on the horizon at dawn. 12 chambers separated by gates of fire, each gate guarded by entities that had no common name. They had names that had to be pronounced with perfect accuracy for the gates to open. One wrong syllable, and the way was closed forever. The first region of the Duat was a vast, dark corridor, cut by a black river. Ba descended to the banks and waited. Each night, Ra's solar boat crossed these 12 chambers, briefly illuminating each region before moving on. Ra's boat was monumental. Built of light and divine wood, it carried the sun god in the shape of a ram. Around it, a crew of gods rode in silence, and at the prow, curled up in the shadows, lurked the greatest threat in the cosmos, Apophis, the serpent of chaos. A being with no beginning and no end who tried to devour the boat every night, plunging the world into permanent darkness. Every dawn was a victory, but this journey was never guaranteed. Any Ba possessing the right spells could board this boat and cross the Duat under divine protection. Those who didn't sailed alone. Gate after gate. The soul faced guardians with the heads of snakes, crocodiles and jackals, each demanding its own secret name. In addition to the guardians, there were dangers and creatures all along the way, and not every Ba who entered the Duat reached the Hall of the Two Truths. Corridors narrowed until they were almost closed off, and from the cracks in the walls emerged multi-headed serpents, each mouth spewing a continuous jet of fire that swept across the floor like a scythe. Lakes of fire stretched across entire regions, incandescent surfaces that glowed with a low orange light. It wasn't comforting warmth, it was just destruction. Ba, who stepped on the wrong foot, wouldn't sink. He would burn. At the 6th hour, the danger had no form. It was absolute darkness. The inhabitants here didn't attack, they whispered. Bodiless voices that pronounced the name of the dead, luring Ba out of the way. One step in the wrong direction and the right corridor would close. The soul wandered in circles in an endless darkness, lost forever in an hour that never advanced. But for those who advanced, gate after gate, spell after spell, the 12th region opened up like a distant promise, a golden glimmer at the end of the longest corridor. This was where the Duat ended. And what came next? It was the most important moment of all eternity. The doors open slowly. What's on the other side has no human scale. The Hall of the Two Truths is a monumental chamber, black stone columns rising to a ceiling that cannot be seen, illuminated by a light that has no source. On the walls, hieroglyphics cover every inch like a living memory. The air is heavy, still, charged with a solemnity that paralyzes. And in the center of the hall, the scales. Simple, perfect, 2 plates suspended in absolute balance. On one side, a white feather, the feather of Maat, the goddess of truth, order and justice. On the other, the empty space awaiting the most intimate part of the deceased, the heart. The only organ that the Egyptians did not remove during mummification, the only one that had to be present at the trial. Every thought, every decision, every moment of cruelty or kindness was engraved in the heart like marks in stone. Around the hall, seated on stone thrones, 42 judges watched in silence, each one responsible for a specific type of fault: the judge of theft, the judge of lies, the judge of violence, the judge of arrogance. The dead person must go to each one and utter the negative confession, declaring out loud what they didn't do in life. I didn't steal, I didn't lie, I have not killed, I have not profaned the sacred, I have not oppressed the weak. 42 declarations, 42 judges. The Book of the Dead contained each sentence in the right order and with the name of each judge. Those who knew them by heart went ahead. Those who hesitated trembled. Then, Anubis approached. The god of the dead has the body of a man and the head of a black jackal. His movements are slow, precise and emotionless. He removes the dead man's heart with his hands and places it on the scales with a delicacy that contrasts with the absolute weight of the moment. On the other plate, Maat's feather remains motionless, light as air, heavy as the cosmos. The scales oscillate. Standing next to it, Thoth, the god of writing and knowledge, head of ibis, papyrus and calamus in hand, he records every movement of the scales without blinking. His record has no appeal. There is no revision. And behind the scales in the shadows awaits Amit, part lion, part hippo, part crocodile. A being that is neither god nor demon, it is a consequence, the devourer. Amit doesn't hunt, he doesn't chase, he doesn't threaten. It just waits, with a patience that only belongs to beings who know that dinner is coming. If the heart is lighter than the feather, or equal to it, Anubis leads the dead to what comes next, but if the heart is heavier... Thoth notes, Anubis steps back and Amit steps forward. There is no scream, no struggle. The devourer consumes the heart, and with it, the soul. There is no punishment afterwards. There is nothingness, complete extinction, the erasure of everything that person was, or could have been. On the other side of the scales, a different light, not the cold, sourceless light of the Hall of the Two Truths. The bar reunited with the car, the vital energy that had remained attached to the tomb, to form the Ak, the complete, transfigured, immortal soul. This was the definitive form of Egyptian existence after death. The Fields of Iaru were a perfect Egypt, with the Nile overflowing to the right extent, with crops growing 3 times higher than on Earth, with constant light and clean air. And there was work. The Egyptians couldn't conceive of happiness without purpose, so paradise also had fields to cultivate, canals to irrigate, and tasks to fulfill. But these tasks were carried out with a lightness that earthly life never allowed. Without the overseer's whip, without the drought that kills the harvest, without the body that gets tired and sick. It was the same life, purified of everything that made it heavy. And for those who didn't want to work, there were the shabtis, ceramic or stone figurines placed in the tomb. They were like magical servants who awoke in the Fields of Iaru and carried out tasks in the dead person's place when their name was called. The tombs of the pharaohs contained hundreds of them, one for each day of the year. But there was a silent condition that no one escaped. Death in Egypt did not sever the bond between the departed and those who remained. Immortality depended on the memory of the living. Families visited the tombs regularly, not as an act of mourning, but as an active obligation. They brought bread, beer, meat, flowers, and perfumes. Real food, placed in front of the tomb door or inside chapels, built specifically for this purpose. Because the ka of the dead person, their vital energy attached to the tomb, needed to be fed. A ka without offerings would weaken, and a weakened ka threatened the existence of the Ak in the Fields of Iaru. Finally, there was the soul's name, known as the Ren. The name was the most vulnerable part of the Egyptian soul. As long as the name was engraved somewhere, on a wall, a papyrus, a statue, the person existed. Erasing the name was the most severe punishment a pharaoh could impose on an enemy, condemning him to retroactive extinction, as if they had never existed. Each time the tomb was violated or destroyed, a soul was lost forever. It was a complete system. The tomb fed the ka, the name preserved the Ren, the shabtis protected the Ak from compulsory labour, and the living, by keeping it all going, guaranteed not only the immortality of the dead, but the protection of the family by the ancestors who thrived on the other side. An exchange between two worlds that never completely closed. During the Old Empire, between 2700 and 2200 BC, immortality was the exclusive privilege of the pharaoh. Only he was guaranteed ascension after death. The sacred texts engraved on the inner walls of the pyramids existed solely to guide the pharaoh through the Duat. The common people died and disappeared. No judgment, no destiny, and no eternal name. In the Middle Kingdom, between 2050 and 1650 BC, funerary rituals began to expand to the elite. High priests, generals, and royal administrators gained access to simplified versions of the sacred texts, the sarcophagus texts. The afterlife was still expensive. It was still exclusive. But it was no longer a one-man show. The big break came with the new empire. Between 1550 and 1070 BC, the Book of the Dead became a product. The quality of the Book of the Dead determined the safety of the journey. An expensive, complete, and personalised version was more guaranteed than a cheap and simplified one. The wrong gatekeeper might not recognise the dead. The negative confession could be incomplete. Eternity had a price. And as always, those who paid more got there better. The Book of the Dead was last copied around the 1st century BC. With the arrival of Rome and then Christianity, the temples emptied, the scribes left, and the gates of the Duat were closed forever. The tombs were looted, the names scraped from the walls, and the shabtis scattered in collections around the world. But the papyri survived. Today, these texts still exist, preserved in museums, and with the spells intact, and with the illustrations still alive in 3,000-year-old ink. The scales of Anubis still weigh, Mat's feather still floats, and Amit still waits in the shadows. What the Egyptians built was an answer to the question that no civilization has been able to ignore. What happens next? You have just crossed the Duat, from the gates of fire to the Fields of Iaru. If this journey has transported you to the other side of time, leave your like and subscribe to Rising Cycle. Each video is a portal to a different civilization. What's next? Answer in the comments. Thanks for watching.